Hey everyone, Dave Belcher here, Technical Director of Forsaken Studios, and welcome to the third instalment of our Kickstarter Feature Week. Today, I'm going to be covering Naval Systems. Now, we're really excited about our naval system. We're doing things that we haven't seen in any MMO game to date, or in the way we're doing it we haven't seen in any game to date. So we're very excited about what we're doing. So what does make it different? What we're doing is we're making it so that it's almost a ship simulation. You're using the weather and your sails and your control of the ship to gain best advantage from that weather. Throughout the game there'll be persistent weather conditions, so there'll be wind with different strength and direction, and you will need to navigate that ship in order to gain the best advantage of that wind. If you're having to go upwind, maybe you'll have to tack with the ship. If you're running with the wind and you're in a smaller ship, maybe you'll throw up a spinnaker sail to gain that extra boost to your speed. So very much it's a tactical way of sailing your ship, and this ties into the combat system, the naval combat, because the captain who wins those seaborne combats are going to be the ones that have the better understanding of how their ship works and have the better control of the wind and how to use that wind to gain the best advantage in that fight. So it should hopefully lead to much more strategic and tactical ship combat. So the ships themselves, we're going to have as many different sorts of ship as possible, everything from rowboats and small sailing dinghies through frigates and cogs and all the way up to larger boats, so hulks and even galleons. I mean, we're not restricted with the style of ship because obviously this is a low fantasy world, and obviously we're going to make everything fit within the world and its lore, but we do have a lot of diversity in the types of ship we can create. Some of them will have oars, some of them will only be sail ships, smaller ships will only have one mast, larger ships up to 3 or even 4. And so that very much changes the way you command those ships, and the more sails, the more functionality in that ship, the more people you'll need to man it. And now we are giving the option that you can hire NPCs for the task, but we want to make sure that players are always more efficient at that. So if you hire an NPC to hoist a sail, it's going to take longer than an equivalent player. And then when it comes down to it, you can also have multiple players hauling on that sail rope, try and get things going quicker. So obviously it's a group effort sailing a larger ship, with somebody steering, somebody on the sails, the various different masts, somebody on the plumb line to work out depths if required, somebody on the anchor, and then obviously people just manning the decks with their bows and arrows or whatever they are doing on the decks, and your passengers and your people looking after the stores on the ship, and ultimately we want to make it so that if you really wanted to, you could turn a large ship into almost a floating house. We want you to be able to kit it out and customize it to a degree, and to add all those things you might need for longer voyages and longer explorations. So we really want the shipping system, we really want it to be so that if you wanted to come into our game and spend the entirety of your game time as a ship's captain, just sailing your ship around, doing trade routes, going exploring, or even as a pirate hunting down the ships and plundering them for whatever you can get. We want to have it so it's an interesting and in-depth system in such a way that you can do that. And I mean, if the worst case scenario is you're out in the middle of the sea and everyone else are logged off and you're on your own, you can run around all the various stations and exert some control over that ship, but you'll be better off with friends, is probably the key message. So I touched on combat. There's going to be lots of aspects to combat. I mean, obviously the primary one is the tactical side, so with you having to work with the wind and try and maneuver your ship to get a positional advantage over your opponent. But alongside that you have the actual weapons. So this can be everything from just the players on the deck with their ranged weapons, through to catapults and ballistas on some ships, going through cannons. So we honestly believe to have a fun and engaging sea combat scenario, we need to have broadside attacks, and for that we need a form of cannon. Now obviously we can't just throw cannons into the game, because with cannons come gunpowder, with gunpowder come rifles and explosives and steam engines and all sorts of things that just wouldn't fit and wouldn't balance in the rest of the game world. So we have a few ideas of how we can add a cannon style weapon, which will allow us to do broadsides, but they won't be cheap. And we're doing a lot of work on the backstory and the lore to make sure that they do fit in our world. And then you have the more crude weapons. So maybe you have a ram on the front of your ship, so you can get out the oars and get up to ramming speed and actually ram other ships to try and breach them below the waterline. Or even grappling hooks. So get close enough to your opponent, you can chuck over a grapple and pull them in and then board them, and then it turns into a melee fight then to try and fight for control of each other's ships. And then going back to the cannons, so there'll be multiple cannonballs. You'll have your standard cannonball for breaching the ship and trying to sink her, grape shot, so essentially lots of small balls which you will be firing to try and injure passengers on that ship, through to chains, so chains with balls on each end which are aimed and fired into the rigging of the other ship to try and take down their sails. So you'll have multiple different options of the weapons you use, the ordnance you use in those weapons, and also in the actual use and control of that ship within the combat to try and get that positional advantage. So we really think that having something as simple as the wind-based movement, rather than just kind of hitting forward and driving the ship like a car, it adds so many options. It also turns the career of a ship's captain into something that really requires players to invest some time into experimenting and learning how the system works and becoming good as a player at that profession. So the people who you'd hire to ship your goods from one continent to the other are not only the people who are kind of good sailors, but they're the people that know the waters, that know how to use the wind best to make the best speed across the oceans. So really being a experienced and renowned ship's captain is going to be a very sought after profession. So well worth it if you can look down that route. So talking about crossing seas, there's a small thing of navigation. Now we're going to try to get a meaningful nighttime skybox in there with stars to navigate by, but also in daytime you'll have the sun, so we'll try and put in a form of mini game to allow you to navigate using the sun, and then have compasses which you can purchase to add to your ship, along with the other kind of add-ons you can do to customize your ship. So this will allow you to have a level of navigation, but as for sea charts and things like that, those are something you're going to have to make for yourselves, either on paper by your computer, old school style, or maybe we can try and put something in game, but we really haven't looked too deeply into those systems yet. Either way, it's not going to be an easy profession, but I think it's going to be really rewarding. So I think that's covered pretty much everything for the ships. If they have any questions, make sure you drop us a questions either in the Kickstarter comments or on our community forum, and as I did with the other two feature blogs, I'll get them answered as quickly as possible, and then go from there. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you if you're watching on Kickstarter for supporting our Kickstarter. If you haven't supported us yet, please do. If you care about sandbox gaming at all, show you give a book and give a book. And I hope I'll be back soon with our next feature blog. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.